The cabin by the lake was more than wood and stone. It was my late father's dream. He built it with his own hands, plank by plank, when he retired from the army. For me, it wasn't just a retreat. It was a piece of him, a place where I could breathe. But ever since the new HOA president, Karen Whitfield, had taken charge, every homeowner on the lake lived in fear. Karen was relentless. Measuring fences with a ruler, photographing mailboxes that weren't regulation color, fining families for having too many kids splashing in the lake. She thrived on control, and no one dared confront her. Until me. That morning I wasn't alone. Inside the cabin sat Michael Green, the state attorney general. He wasn't there for a vacation. He had agreed to meet me because I'd gathered dozens of complaints from neighbors. Stories of intimidation, fines that drove retirees to sell their homes, and a growing list of abuses that screamed corruption. We were deep into documents when it happened. The slam of the door, the sharp heels clacking on the hardwood floor. Karen stormed in without knocking, her voice shrill. "I knew it! I knew you were up to something! This cabin isn't even painted in approved colors, and you've got vehicles parked too close to the shoreline. That's a violation and—" She froze. Her eyes landed on the tall man sitting across from me, his calm gaze piercing straight through her. Michael didn't need to say who he was. Anyone who'd lived in the state knew his face from press conferences and news reports. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her power drained from her voice, but her arrogance didn't. "Well, rules are rules," she stammered. "And I have authority here." Michael leaned back, his voice steady but commanding. "Authority. That's exactly what I came here to discuss." The silence that followed was heavier than any fine she'd ever issued. For the first time, Karen realized she wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the one being watched. Karen tried to recover, but her words tumbled awkwardly. "These people, they don't follow regulations. Without order, the whole community falls apart. I'm just doing my job." Michael slid a file across the table. Inside were over 50 affidavits, photos, and letters. Families who'd been bullied, seniors who'd cried as they sold homes they'd lived in for decades, parents terrified of Karen's constant harassment. "You call this order?" Michael's voice cut like steel. "I call it abuse of power." Karen's face flushed red. She tried to argue, but for every excuse, there was evidence. And for every raised voice, there was Michael's calm authority dismantling her words piece by piece. I watched as Karen shrank. Not physically, but in spirit. The woman who strutted around the lake like a queen now looked cornered. She had built her power on fear, and fear was slipping away. Michael stood. "This isn't just about one community. What you've done here is a pattern we've seen in HOAs across the state. Unfair rules, extortion through fines, intimidation. But here's the difference: these people finally decided to speak." He looked at me, and one man had the courage to call it out. For the first time, Karen was silent. The weeks that followed were a storm. An official investigation was launched. Karen was stripped of her position, fined heavily, and banned from holding leadership in any HOA again. But more than her downfall, what mattered was what rose from it. The community. Neighbors who had once whispered in fear now laughed together on the lake shore. Kids played without someone counting the minutes. Retirees planted flowers in colors they actually liked. The cabin became a gathering place, not just for me, but for all of us. A reminder that when you stand up, even against the loudest voices, you give others permission to do the same. And as for Michael Green, the Attorney General, he sent me a note months later. Sometimes justice doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts at a kitchen table, with someone brave enough to say, "Enough. You did that." That letter hangs framed on the wall of my cabin today. Because this wasn't just the day Karen barged in. It was the day fear ended and freedom began. The lake felt different after Karen was gone. For years, her shadow had hung over every dock, every yard, every gathering. People used to avoid one another, afraid that even a friendly chat would be reported as noise disturbance. But now, laughter returned to the shoreline. The first Saturday after the investigation ended, families gathered at my cabin. The place my father built, once quiet and heavy with memories, was alive again. Kids ran through the grass, neighbors grilled food, old men shared fishing stories without worrying about unauthorized gatherings. I sat on the porch, watching the sunset blaze across the lake. For the first time in years, it felt like peace. But more than that, it felt like freedom. Mrs. Ortega, a widow who had nearly lost her home because of fines, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "You don't know what you did for us," she whispered. "We thought we were powerless. You reminded us we're not." Her words struck deep. I hadn't done it alone. We all had. Every neighbor who signed their name, every voice that spoke out, every person who decided fear had ruled long enough. Weeks later, Michael Green visited again, quietly and without the press. He walked with me along the dock, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said, "what happened here is going to change more than just this lake. We're drafting new legislation to make HOAs more accountable. People deserve homes, not prisons." I looked out over the rippling water, thinking of my father. He always said the cabin should be a place of rest, not of worry. And now, it finally was. That night, I lit a lantern on the porch. One by one, neighbors lit their own across the shoreline. It wasn't planned, but the lake glowed with a circle of light, a quiet celebration of unity. Karen's reign was over, but her story became a reminder. Power bit on fear never lasts. Community, courage, and truth always outshine it. And as the stars spread across the sky, I realized something. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in courts or capitals. They're fought in ordinary cabins, when ordinary people choose to stand up.